everybody. Good afternoon. You are wonderful. What a great audience. You can't tell me that people at James Madison University don't love poetry. We're poetry lovers here. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our second reading of the season. I'm Joanne Gavin, Director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center, and it is a pleasure indeed to be here with a friend. I want to say first of all to you, I'm starting just a couple of minutes ahead of time because I want to give her the full hour. The Q&A will start at about 4:40 and go for 10 or so minutes. So be prepared with your questions so we can take advantage of our guest and have her tell you all the things you want to know. We also have books available for you if you want to buy a book. Her book, Markings on Earth. We have several copies back there, but we don't have a lot of copies. So if you want to get a book, get in line and get those books really early. It's my pleasure to welcome Karenne Wood to James Madison University. It is especially a pleasure for me because we are friends. When Dr. Laura Hinkman from the English department called me and asked if Furious Flower would support a reading by Karenne Wood, I said, oh, absolutely. Not only does she have many great and informative things to say about Native American literature, language, culture, she and I have spent some time together at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities. There she directs the Virginia Indian programs. And I've heard her speak on so many wonderful occasions where she has talked about Indian literature, language, history, but this will be the very first time I get to hear her read her own poetry. She was keeping that as a secret. So, it is a pleasure to introduce my colleague, the Assistant Director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center, who will give a formal introduction to our guest. As she's coming, I want to brag on her a little bit. We have an online journal called The Fight and the Fiddle, and we inaugurated that journal in the fall semester of 2014. Well, we are getting noticed. We just learned this week that poets and writers saw our online journal article on Ross Gay and picked it up. You might want to check out The Fight and the Fiddle on our website, Furious Flower. All right, so without further ado, please welcome to the stage Elizabeth Hoover.
Thank you. In his book, In the American Grain, the poet William Carlos Williams rewrites the myth of the heroic discovery of America. He writes, history for us begins with murder and enslavement, not with discovery. In her new collection of poetry, Weaving the Boundary, which will be published in March 2016, the poet Karenne Wood offers her own challenge to that myth. Nothing was discovered. Everything was already loved. I prefer Wood's vision, not because love absolves, but because she offers a more capacious vision. For Williams, murder and enslavement ends the narrative for Native people. In Wood, love allows for continuance and survival. This is what makes This is what makes Wood's poetry radical and visionary. She doesn't just hold up the violence that was meted out and continues to be meted out on Native Americans to say, isn't this awful? But she constantly challenges us to rewrite, reconsider, and reimagine both our history and, by extension, our present. She writes, "What remains to be done is everything, daily, again and again. Some of us will be silenced. Some of us will wake less ashamed. Some may rise without wings to name what injures us." At the center of Wood's poetry is that powerful act of naming what has been left out of the historical record, and when those names cannot be recovered, making us aware of the erasure. The act of recovery that is so integral to Wood's poetry is also at the center of her activism and scholarship. As a member of the Monacan Indian Nations Tribal Council, she has been working to obtain federal recognition for her tribe. And I just learned today that the bill to gain recognition for the Monacans and 5 other tribes is currently in front of Congress. So you can write to your elected representatives and let them know that you support that. She received her PhD from the University of Virginia in linguistic anthropology and has done field work to recover lost languages. She's also the director of Virginia Indian programs at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities. And this year she was named one of Virginia's Women in History by the Library of Virginia. And her first book of poetry, Markings of the Earth, won the North American Native Authors Award and is available in the lobby. Welcome, Karenne Wood.
I'm welcoming you to this place, to the homeland of my people, the Monacan Indians, who started out somewhere in the middle of the Ohio River Valley and came down through West Virginia to what we call Virginia today, who have been here for several thousand years. This is our home place, and we love it very much. We're very proud to still be here and to have survived many of the terrible things that have happened to us along the way. But we don't want to stop the story there. It's not just about survival. It's about adding to the story and continuing to ensure that everybody's voice gets heard in how we tell history. That's at the core of what I do with my poetry today. My first book, Markings on Earth, focused primarily on my own journey and my sense of trying to come to terms with my identity as a person of mixed race, as a woman, as someone who has experienced violence in different forms, collectively and individually. And the second book expands that story and moves it into a wider narrative about what's happened to American Indian people, but also about the power of love to reclaim and to re-energize us and to bring us together as human beings. So I want to start with the first book, Markings on Earth, and then move into the second one. This poem is called Directions. 1. East is a Genesis, house made of dawn, where streaked clouds in lavender, red, orange brush the world's edge, where the dance circle begins. Doors of domed wigwams face morning. From pipestone tobacco smoke wafts as striated light washes rivers with green. Deep in the forest, fiddleheads unfold. Green of new leaf, the bright glossy hair rises through red clay, lighting the world. 2. South is the summer's white heat without shade. Yellowing grasses bend with wind's breath as bulrushes lean over bodies of lovers, clothes peeled like fruit skins, the limp sleeves of August forgotten. Hydrangeas blossom in blues, whites, beyond tongues of tiger lilies' flames. Among bee balm, hummingbirds hover. Every live thing grows, sinking roots deeper into black rock. 3. West is a space of thought, sparse land with cliffs brushed magenta and gold. Leaves slowly turn to sunset hues as women gather choke cherries, the elder men crafting gourd rattles, singing thin clouds into lightning for corn. We who cannot stay here forever read the cliff's face where our ancestors wrote to us pictures in ochre. Beyond a vast darkness, they wait for us. 4. North is the country of reflected light. Shadows like wolves, the curved fang takes moose by its haunches, spatters scarlet fire onto ice. Footprints recede into tundra. Aurora borealis, a dance among spirits, new snow piled on boughs, ribs gnawed with scrimshawed grooves. Death groans startle horizons, grow still. Bones trace edges of ptarmigan, caribou. Whiteout, a porcelain bear waits beside the world's ice-crusted rim. 5. Sky is the casing of our breath, suspending stars. The asthma's violet arc sends snow gently and hurtles bright flashes like war cries through darkness. Lightning bugs zigzag above us, tiny phosphorescent lamps. Celestial palette, turquoise, cerulean, cobalt, azure. Among its luminaries, the sun walks the world's edge. A brilliant moon rises while bats leave caverns for air, another home. 6. What to say about the earth whose love lives like bright knives within us? Like us, it is alchemy, chromium, zinc, magnesium, copper. Like us, a fire swirls within. Disordered, too, the balance skewed. The stones, the trees, the waters speak. And if we are dust as earth is, let it receive us into the embrace we barely left, memory remembered, green as young bones. Oh, let the next world look just like this one. 7. This is a prayer, its palms already curved around our dust. Lovers sing out from grasses they become, sing to us, here, now, this ground, these mountains skirted in mist, this hallowed distance between worlds where sage, sweetgrass, and cedar burn, the smoke intertwined with your hair. We who have loved you grow as dark roots beneath your toes. We touch you, here, now. This is called My Standard Response. It's the only funny poem I've ever written, so you're permitted to laugh. 1. The first question is always phrased this way. So, how much Indian are you? 2. We did not live in teepees. We did not braid our hair. We did not fringe our shirts. We did not wear war bonnets. We did not chase the buffalo. We did not carry shields. We were never Plains Indians. We tried to ride, but we kept falling off of our dogs. 3. A local official came to our office to ask our help with a city event. He had a splendid idea, he said. To kick off the event and show everyone that our tribe was still around, we should go up to the bluff overlooking the city and make a big smoke signal. Then they would know we were here. Who ever heard of smoke signals in the forest? I imagined us up on the bluff lighting one of those fire starter bricks. We haven't made fire since the Boy Scouts took over. And how would the citizens know it was us? They'd probably call out the fire department. 4. As they ask, they think, yes, I can see it in her face. High cheekbones, whatever those are. Dark hair. Here's a thought. Don't we all have high cheekbones? I'm sick of explaining myself. You know, I finally say it doesn't matter to my people. I ride off to my ranch-style home. Time to weave a basket or something. Okay, this is the time of year for this particular poem, and it's one of my favorites. It's called Making Apple Butter, and it came about because we decided that we wanted to do an economic development venture in our tribe, and we were going to capitalize on something that our women did exceptionally well, which was making apple butter and jelly. And we were going to market the apple butter and jelly with these beautiful gift baskets that one of our tribal members made. What we found out in the process is that the women didn't care at all about making money. They liked being in the kitchen together and working on the apple butter and the jelly. And so that was very exciting to me, just to be part of that circle. When you get elder ladies from our tribe together without men there, you learn a lot, and it's a very funny experience because they kind of let it all go. So anyway, this is the poem. In late September, evenings bring Monacan women to the tribal center kitchen where they make apple butter. They gather their aprons, headscarves tied on, descending the hillsides with dusk. The first night they pare, core, and quarter cooking apples, imperfect yellow spheres stacked in bushel baskets, no crimson wax delicious, no green Granny Smiths, no empires. All evening women chop as apple chunks turn the color of earth in the air, as leaves begin to yellow in the darkness. They need 1 quart of apples for every half pint, baskets empty as fingers grow moist, then wrinkle among laughter and the scrapes of small knives that pare and pare again. The second night, boiling begins. Scents of hot cider, cinnamon, ginger, and cloves rise to spread around the women like thick, hooded robes. Quarts of cider or vinegar are stirred and stirred. That ain't it. To add the chopped apples, simmer an hour, add sugar, spices, boil again until dark gold mixtures turn the mahogany velvet of trees and the scent anoints the hair. Now, through the music of spoons, jars, and pots, through laughter, what remains is reduced to the essence of apple, roots and limbs laden with gold circles. We are blessed by the hands of these women who ladle into jars an enchantment made by heart, who condense, seal, process, and sell apple butter at St. Paul's Church Bazaar, $3 for a pint. And this poem is called Returning. You never forget a white chapel perched by the roadside, the bulk of granite outcrop on which it sits like a hat, the red buds, yellowed now, the dogwood rusting, dignified as a matriarch, as fluted leaves begin to encircle it, the mountains against orange clouds to the west, a chimney steaming with the season's first drift of smoke, pale against the sky and sinuous as a woman undressed in someone's window. Across fields you hear the shriek of a hawk gliding over Bear Mountain past spines of corn arcing back toward the earth, and smell a faint reek of apples shriveled together in the grass. The creek's bliss continues under the road behind trees where a cabin settles into the ground. Can you genuinely claim these, and do they reclaim you? Dusty yards, red-rimmed eyes of men in overalls, women with stained hands, their faces resigned beyond the years, irreversibly, and are they your own? Their thin voices brittle as their joints, shelves in their root cellars lined with calloused potatoes and onion bulbs, apples in barrels, rows of home-canned provisions that gleam in jars, their cordwood stacked in readiness, quilts on their beds. The autumn glows around you, hilltops inflamed in the sun's last light. The land you never forget, rises, falls, and rises again, always. Yes, they reclaim you in a way you need not understand. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to switch over to this other book now. I'm so excited about this new book. I haven't written a book in 15 years, so it's very... This poem is called To Keep Faith. It's an idea like light, the star's trajectory over sacred places that rise from their landscapes, dark mesa, dark desert tower, dark river swelling across the shadowed fields of the Republic. This is your passion to save the earth's cathedrals. The machinery of our country's interests works against it. In another city, you might have disappeared, blindfolded at sunrise with hands behind your back. In another time, not that long ago, I might have found you face up in a field of silence among the still beautiful bodies of Dakota men. To speak for the earth, I say history is against us here, as though you hadn't already recalled who I was before I learned to be wary of stories, or as though your words hadn't entered me like light, small wave caps riding on all that darkness. For you then, some words about light, relentless light, incantatory words we could lick like blue flames, words to keep faith with each other and earth, that searing love which still claims us. It's a little harder to do this. Okay. This poem is called Boundary, for my father. I travel alone as though gathering medicine, moose and elk on Trail Ridge, bighorn in the Badlands, Anasazi ruins at Bandelier. I map America as homage to you. Somewhere between Canyon de Chelly and Bear Butte, I forgave myself for being unable to save you. Each effort a fractal, love absolute and impotent. Black wings, spirits, ice. Across the estuary, a glacier's core shudders. It calves, the sea heaves. I know the way back, like cross-hatched, stained trails on hands of those men who lowered you into the ground. This one is called Without Wings, in memory of Mary Belvin Wade. These are only the intricate, ordinary rituals to which we subject ourselves as women, rubbing and polishing mops, copper kettles, news of your death, stacks of papers, checks, balanced accounts. We might remember women laughing, the tribal center kitchen, a damp spot on the back of a blouse. It is not the White House where we went only once, where gloved hands in galvanized sinks arrange dainty, identical hors d'oeuvres on trays. There is no holy light, only the comforting motions of scrubbing and grief, a butterfly outside. What else? There are no eagles in this poem. How we go on, the sky a gray, seamless blank. Then the lake, a white dogwood, 2 mockingbirds squabbling. What remains to be done is everything daily again and again. Some of us will be silenced. Some will wake less ashamed. Some may rise without wings to name what injures us. This poem is called 1 in 3 or 4. It's based on statistics. There are too many of us for you to believe you are either alone or responsible. No woman asks for this. Some are children, some are boys. Every one of us should have been heard. This is for Anna, age 17, who was then beaten and left to die. For Nathan, who at 11 admired the basketball coach. For Rosaline, who sees in her baby the face of a rapist. and who finds that face difficult to love. For sisters when soldiers came, mothers imprisoned among guards, for aunties, grandmas, daughters, sons, for one who was tied and one who tried to scream, one whose husband watched, one violated time after time, one torn apart, who called the police, who did not call her back, who went to the clinic where there were no kits, who numbed her shame with drugs, who could not drink enough to forget, who took her life, who believed she was an object, who said nothing, who knew no one was there and that no one would ever be there. Know this, there are so many that if we could speak, our voices might spread like flood waters over their boots and swell past security stations, that if we cried out together, we might finally understand it as an assault on all people, all creation, and maybe then there would be justice in this war to claim yourself, a struggle mapped all over the flesh of every woman or child who has known what it is to be used as you were, your sacred body. In a number of native cultures, there's a story about the deer woman or the antelope woman who lures men out into the woods and changes them so that they can't come back. It's kind of a passionate story. And I have a different take on that, and this is my poem called Deer Woman. He hunted me into the clouds as I sought the blue star-petaled flower, its scent like magnolia and peach. I left my family in the meadow to pick my steps across patched snow where fields grasped edges of sky. There is within some of us a longing to be stripped clean. Alongside, the forest held his shape. His scent rose to me with the wind. Too late I knew him, too late to find cover, and I ran as I was made to, haunches taut, nostrils steaming. Like a swallow, I darted into glistening whiteness. When I tired, he was there. His circle tightened, dark and dark-eyed, hypnotic. I could feel his hunger as my own. I had taunted his dreams more than once, dreamt that mouth, the merciless craving in him. There is within some of us a longing to be stripped clean, to give it all, strings of sinew, tufted hair, marrow, white ropes of fat, to bear the body's pulse. I froze, heavy with the need to dissolve into him, his mouth, a deep red song of an appeasable desire. On the wind, I hear another song, my family calling out to me, calling me into my name. But I cannot return from this altitude, bound to his hunger, which is a kind of love. I will kneel in a cloud's wisp of grace to discover how completely our own wanting wounds us. Some of the poems I write in this book have a historical focus, and I'm calling out voices of people whose narratives didn't usually enter the story. This poem is called Bartolom De Las Casas, 1542. So it was that we discovered a flowering island which we called Hispaniola, and which the natives called Haiti, or mountains, and Quisqueya, mother of lands. And the people were guileless, generous, and kind, devoid of wicked thought. They coveted not. They were beautiful, delicately built, suited poorly for labor. Into this land of the meek came our Spaniards like ravening beasts, terrorizing, afflicting, with methods of torture never seen or heard of before, to such a degree, I believe, that a number of 3 million souls is now not exceeding 200, and in less than 50 years. Who will believe it? More than 30 islands similarly ruined, land pocked in a mad search for gold, people thrown into slavery, whole nations destroyed on the mainland. I imagine 15 million people unjustly killed. The Indian men hid their children and wives, saying Christians could not have come from heaven, and still our Spaniards took them, cut them to pieces, sparing few, and with such abandon that I feared for our souls. Removed from laws that govern civil men, they became worse than brutes. Indeed, the war dogs were kinder, for they killed to eat and did not so loudly enjoy it. Of the survivors we made slaves, men died in the mines, women died in the fields without time or place to come together. The milk in the women's breasts dried up, infants perished, and thus was emptied that place which had seemed paradise. I'm very interested in the story of this woman, one of the first officially documented United States prisoners of war. Her name was Mokya. She was a survivor of the Sand Creek massacre. We had to dig holes afterward in the creek bank with our hands to hide ourselves. We could not feel the wounds, could not think. My husband, my mother, who could describe the noise everywhere? Children chopped to pieces. Did the soldiers think us human, stumbling blind through cold to find another Cheyenne camp? I dreamt a spotted war horse and sang my death song. Where our people had been, wind-like voices, we no longer inhabited ourselves. Apparitions, nightmares, an unholy fury. Sisistas, I had no one, rode with the men to look for that Shivington who called himself a man of God, a God who cannot hear. Then Custer's men came to the Washita. Black Kettle's people died as though we could live through it again. Spirit warriors, we murdered those settlers, kept their children. Surrender meant nothing. A train to Florida, leg irons, I was a prisoner of war. And a woman once, with shorn hair, I crossed the first of 4 rivers. The journey of the departed. I have not been alive all this time. This one's called Remembering Ira Hayes. Born in 1923, the year before American Indians became U.S. citizens through an act of Congress, without their approval or involvement in order to hasten their assimilation, who grew up on the Gila River Reservation, where Akmel Adam people, known to others as Pima, had lived for more than 2,000 years, who possessed the gift of quiet, his elders might have said, not needing much conversation, who followed radio reports of the Second World War until in 1942, at the age of 19, he enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve for the duration of what was then called the National Emergency, who was trained as a parachutist, nicknamed Chief Falling Cloud, and who saw combat in New Guinea, who was stationed at Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945, where he participated with 1 Navy corpsman and 5 others from Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, in raising an American flag on Mount Suribachi, the second flag raised that day in one of the war's final battles, which lasted more than a month, left more than 25,000 American Marines dead or wounded, and almost completely annihilated the Japanese garrison of 22,000 men, whose flag-raising moment was forever commemorated by a single image captured by an Associated Press photographer, which won a Pulitzer Prize, was used to sell war bonds, and became the biggest-selling U.S. postal stamp of all time, a national symbol of patriotism that outlived the war, as Ira did, whose buddy Mike Strank, father figure to Ira and the others, was hit a week after the flag-raising as he guided the company to safety during heavy sniper fire, the shell tearing his heart from his chest, whose buddy Harlan Block assumed command until a mortar round sliced him from neck to groin, his intestines dropping to the ground, whose buddy Frank Sousley fell dead from a sniper's bullet several days later during an assault, whose buddy Jack Bradley, the corpsman, wounded by shrapnel, was airlifted to a hospital in Guam. He later worked as a funeral director, raised a family, and never spoke about the war, who, with Jack Bradley and fellow survivor Rene Gagnon, met President Truman and accompanied the 7th War Bond Tour to 32 U.S. cities, who returned home when the war ended quieter than ever, plagued by memories of his friends and the fact that Harlan Block had been mistaken in the photo for another man, who hitchhiked 1,300 miles to Block's home in Texas in order to tell his family the truth, and who helped to get the controversy resolved, who noted during ensuing years that strangers would send him cards or simply show up on the reservation wanting to meet him, which made him uncomfortable, who was arrested 52 times for public drunkenness, who, like other combat veterans at that time, received no help from the military, no way to work through what was then called shell shock or battle fatigue, who died alone at 32 beside an abandoned shed from effects of alcohol and exposure less than 10 years after the event that made him a national figure, and whose death the coroner termed an accident, who received the largest funeral in Arizona history, and who was buried at Arlington National Cemetery, which is also the location of a monument that commemorates the flag raising, the most massive bronze statue in the world at 110 feet and 100 tons. Inscribed around its base are the date and location of every major Marine Corps engagement from 1775 to the present, but on it none of the men whose images it depicts are named, who wanted to be a Marine but not a hero. I'm going to do one more. This is a poem that's in parts. So I'm going to read 3 of the parts. It's called The Naming. Some nights we feel the furred darkness of an ancient one's breath and are trapped in awakening, dismembered by events we no longer recall. We can touch the windowsill where October air gathers as hours slip past in thin robes, the forest a concert of voices. The last crickets let go of their songs. The land speaks its language arising from its own geography. The mountains' hulked shapes are blue whales remembering when they were undersea ridges, and rivers are serpentine strands hammered from silver, and dark trees talk to the wind, weaving mortal lives, drumbeats, pillars of smoke, voices wavering into updraft, the storytellers shifting the present. Into the earth they went away to hide. When their destroyers rode in, the air shattered. Gold plains were strewn with bodies left to rot, skinned humps of marbled meat humming with decay. When the earth cradled their skulls like white crocus bulbs, they went into the ground. They could not return until we sang to them. Tatanka oyate upo, tatanka oyate ahirake. Do you remember when we lived as people who prayed when they offered themselves? Now they stand fenced with guardrails, hooves mucking the earth. No one sings when they die. Someone keeps saying, aren't they just wonderful? Look at them. Ask their forgiveness. I have one more section here. The wind lifts a circling dust, and all that has been begins rising. Ancestors, chipped flints and potsherds, photographs, cartridge shells, acorns and jerky, buffalo dung, cavalry uniforms, medals from Washington, antlers, arrow shafts, blankets, bones, discarded tires, shattered glass, ashes in fire pits, dry rotted baskets, tobacco ties, tin cans, commodity wrappers, Indian names and the names strung before us, cavern walls painted with white petroglyphs, pressed forms of insects and fish gone to rock, and the rocks to air swirling, settling again into the silence we become.
So in a lot of your poems, you talked a lot about nature, and also in a lot of them you talked about kind of like the unity of women in your tribe. So I was wondering today, like, what does tradition mean to your tribe, and what do you do to like carry on tradition?
Okay, that's a really great question. What does tradition mean to our tribe, and what do we do to carry it on? I think tradition is grounded in this notion of respect for, what we kind of think of as the web of life. That can be thought of as a stereotype, but I think for our people it really does matter to imagine ourselves as related to the beings that surround us, and because of that to have an obligation of respecting them. So there's that kind of spiritual base beneath everything that we do. We've lost a lot of our culture, and so we are trying to resurrect some of the traditions. We don't have stories about how rabbit lost his tail and some of the things that other tribes talk about, but we also don't have a language. We have a documented language that nobody speaks. So one of the things that I'm working on with other people in our tribe is the idea of revitalizing our language, bringing back music that we sang and words that we used, and eventually trying to decide how we want to speak that language, because it's not going to be exactly like it was 300 years ago.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to know what your writing process is like, and you seem to have such a rich realm of experience, and how do you figure out exactly what you want to write about? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Okay, what is my writing process like? It's really random and haphazard. Sometimes ideas come to me when I'm doing something else. Sometimes I have the time to focus on them right then, but usually when an idea strikes me, it's something that I'm passionate about, or something that it just kind of hits me as being really unusual and wondrous in nature or history, and I have to kind of sit with it for a little while until words start coming as ideas. And then I often just write down some ideas on the back of any old piece of paper, and if I'm lucky, I save it. I try to focus on that now, and to use those lines to spur the creation of other ones. I remember an interview with Wisława Szymborska one time, and I think she won the Nobel Prize for Poetry, and she said that lots of the other Nobel winners had exciting jobs where they were discovering cures for diseases or doing cool stuff in the lab, and poets just kind of lay around on a couch, and every once in a while they jump up and write something down, but mostly they just lay around on the couch. I don't really do that. I have to work, and so there's always a balancing act, but when I'm lucky, it comes out the right way. Every once in a while I get one that just comes flowing out in a torrent, and that one in 3 or 4 was like that. But usually I have to work it through for a long time, and very often the lines I'm most attached to are the ones I have to get rid of. It's very sad.
I'm going to ask a question that perhaps is in the minds of many people out there. You talked so movingly and poignantly about the Native American experience in this country. And you talk a lot about injustice. As a member of the African American community, I know about injustice. How do you deal with the rage that you have to feel sometimes in rehearsing that history and dealing with the present? How do you deal with the rage so that you become a positive spokesperson for Native American culture and history, and that you do so much as a scholar to get information out there? But what do you do with the rage?
Okay. What do I do with the rage of historical injustice against Native people and others? I try to channel it so that I become a vehicle for that anger to transform the way other people think. That's when I'm most successful. I try to come up with language that's striking, or experiences that are new, or try to make historical personalities into human beings so that we can feel what they went through. because it's really important to me to expand that story and change perspectives. And I believe that when we're able to build allies, then we're able to broaden our connections to other people and pursue common goals. It doesn't do me any good to walk around bitter, you know. And it was actually an African American civil rights activist who said that, you know, if I carry that around, that just hurts me. I become angry and twisted up. But when I'm able to project it outward and to connect with other people, you know, most people don't want to feel bad about what happened. They want to know that they can do something to change how it goes forward, you know. And I joke around, I say, well, white guilt doesn't do us any good unless people are going to die and give us their land, you know. But the reality is, it doesn't do us any good whatsoever. It's more important to connect and to talk about what we can do now to make sure things like that never happen again. And I think we're coming to a better place in our society. You know, we were talking earlier about, it was only 1963 in Amherst County that schools were desegregated and Monacan kids were allowed to go to public school. I was alive then, you know, and kids today don't believe us sometimes when we talk about how awful things could be. I mean, one teenager went to his dad and said, did they really used to lynch people? You know, it wasn't that long ago that it happened. So it shows how profoundly people have altered the way that they think in many cases, and that gives me hope. We have a lot of work still to do, but I have hope. Yeah.
Let's thank Karen Wood one more time for a really wonderful reading, and thank you all for being
Thank you.